Hello, friends. Welcome back to my channel. Continuing this series of Afsar Ka Safar, today we are going to speak to an officer from Indian Revenue Service, Customs and Indirect Taxes. He cleared in 2014 and is currently posted in Mumbai. So, without further ado, let's welcome him. Welcome, Rishikesh, and thank you for joining us. Rishikesh, before we begin, please tell us a little about yourself.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to interact with everyone. My name is Rishikesh Utpat. I'm a 2014 batch IRS Customs and Indirect Taxes Officer. I have done my BE Computer Science from Pune University. I graduated in 2012. And right after my graduation, I gave the civil services exam and I cleared in my second attempt. And I've been, working as an IRS officer ever since. I was initially posted in Bangalore and I'm currently posted in Mumbai, where I continue to work and live.
Okay. So, Rishikesh, does that mean that you will get posted all over India, or are you confined to one state?
Yes, the Indian Revenue Service is what is known as a central service.
Okay.
So therefore, compared to in the entire hierarchy of in the entire system of Group A Class 1 services offered by the Government of India, there are three services which are known as the cadre-based services or the All India services, which is the IAS, the IPS, and the Indian Forest Service. These three are cadre-based services where officers are, broadly limited to a state cadre. There are, of course, a lot of exceptions to those rules, but broadly confined to a particular state cadre. The remaining services, Indian Revenue Service being one of them, is a central service where postings and transfers can happen all over the country. There are various zones in which the country is divided, and there is a posting policy. But the policy fundamentally envisions that officers will be posted across the country at any station.
Okay. So, majorly, is it that the kind of service that you are in, are you posted generally in the capital cities of the state, or that can vary?
No, that definitely varies. What we have is that stations are classified as Group A, Group B, Group C cities. Group A cities are typically state capitals and metros. Group B are relatively smaller cities such as Pune, Aurangabad, Kolhapur. And Group C cities would be, relatively smaller town places such as in Maharashtra, it would be something like Nanded
Okay.
or Dapoli. Those would be Group C cities. The classification of these cities, since Indian Revenue Service is primarily tasked with tax administration, it also depends on the nature of economic activity around those regions.
Okay.
So typically, the posting policy envisions that an officer would be posted at all three stations. Typically, senior level positions are not present in Group C cities. They're relatively lesser present in Group C cities. So for at senior levels, officers tend to be posted in Group A or Group B. But broadly, it is envisioned that officers will be posted in all three, Group A, Group B, Group C. It is not limited to state capitals as such.
Okay. Okay. Um, there is one question that I wanted to ask. Uh, Before you came into this service, you said that you were from an engineering background, and there are a number of
Yeah.
engineers. I am sure that this is a typical question that people ask. There are a number of engineers and doctors coming into this service. Uh, can you say over a period of time that the talent that is getting attracted to UPSC or civil services in particular has become better and is more what should I say? Is it comes from a more professional background? Is that true?
Better is a subjective thing. So I would not want to comment on better or worse. But
Okay.
yes, it is true that a larger number of officers coming in do come from a professional degree, from an engineering or medical background. That number has definitely increased over the years. I feel there are a few reasons for it. First and foremost, compared to say 20 years ago, the number of engineering colleges have also increased,
Okay.
substantially increased,
Okay.
which is why the number of engineers being generated in India itself is much larger.
Okay.
20 years ago, my hometown is in Pune, and I did my engineering in Pune. 20 years ago, or 30 years ago, Pune would have had 3 or 4 engineering colleges. Today, Pune has around 20 engineering colleges.
Right.
So, the number of engineers has increased. The second factor is, in a lot of ways, as an engineer, I can say this: the need to do something meaningful, to have a professional career in a field that is meaningful, that is satisfying, is also something that a lot of people look forward to.
Okay.
I know of a lot of colleagues who said they don't want to be in a job where they're seated in a cubicle and just seated in front of a computer for long hours. They
Okay.
want to do something meaningful with their professional career. So that is also another reason why a lot of engineers and doctors are turning towards the civil services. And plus, for better or for worse, I mean, some may disagree with this, but the service conditions in the civil services have also increased. Uh, the salaries have been revised, which also makes it much more practical for a lot of people with professional degrees to come to the civil services. So
Okay.
therefore, I feel the number has increased. Whether the officers of this generation are better than the previous generation, that is something that time will be able to tell. And I feel that's a responsibility on all of us to prove that we are better and we are able to better contribute to the nation. But at the end of the day, that's a very subjective comparison.
Okay, okay. Why I asked this question is that I always had this thing in mind that if you are doing an engineering course, or you are taking up a seat in a professional area where somebody else who is more inclined towards doing it is missing out probably on that seat, and from there you move on to a completely different field, completely different area of interest. Um, so that was my question, that is my question for that matter again, that why is it that kids after 12th join engineering, or um, say become a doctor, and then instead of pursuing masters, they are moving on to the administrative side of this, because these are completely different fields.
I would agree with you as far as medicine is concerned, because unfortunately in India we still do have extremely limited seats in medical colleges. Uh, Particularly, that is true at not just the MBBS level, but that is much more true in terms of a MD. And I do have colleagues, and there are a lot of officers across departments who have done a MBBS and a MD and then joined the civil services. But these skill sets that we learn are extremely relevant in as a civil servant. Speaking of the Indian Revenue Service, I find that I'm a computer engineer,
Mhm.
and I find that my skill set has been extremely useful, extremely relevant
Okay.
in not just designing and managing key technological programs. We do have taken a lot of initiatives, in-house initiatives, trade initiatives where a lot of technical skills or IT solutions have been developed.
Mhm.
So that is one area where having officers with a technological background is appreciated. In fact, I would go so far as to say that for a particular role, the fact that I'm a computer engineer is a qualification
Okay.
rather than a disqualification. That in certain for certain responsibilities they would be given to me because I have a computer engineering degree. So
Okay.
that is an added asset. Uh, Plus, as to why so many people turn to engineering after that 12th standard, that's not really relevant to civil services. But what my opinion is, a lot of youngsters these days, or in the past 15 years, 10 years, did not really have an idea of what exactly is it that they want to pursue.
Mhm.
There are a few youngsters who are privileged enough to know what their inclinations are, and then they have the resources and the opportunities to pursue that. But if a 18-year-old does not know what he or she wants to do, then it's a safe bet that their parents would ask them to pursue a qualification that would give them some stability, some assured job at the end of that career. I did an engineering degree because I enjoyed it. From my school days, I was always fascinated by computers. I did programming. It's something that I enjoyed. My parents did give me the option of pursuing any degree that I wanted to, but I voluntarily went to engineering and I enjoyed it thoroughly. But as a civil servant, I feel that the skill set I gained as an engineer is quite relevant, is quite application oriented, and it is going to keep on happening in the future also. As an Indian Revenue Service officer, we interact with a lot of corporations, with a lot of unique businesses, where having the ability to understand how technology works, how markets work, how a lot of new age technologies coming in. We see a lot of immense application of artificial intelligence, data analysis. So I feel all these skills are very relevant and are going to continue to become more and more relevant in the days to come.
Okay, so that you have almost answered my next question. I was going to ask you this: that did you decide to do UPSC? Like some people have a lifelong dream of giving this examination and coming into this service. So was it your lifelong dream, or did you just stumble upon this service somewhere in between?
It was always one of the options that I considered, definitely. I studied in a school named Jnana Prabodhini in Pune, which has along with education, Jnana Prabodhini is an institute that has, a track record of excellent education. But the original intent of creating that school was to take youngsters and train them to become national assets. So this feeling that whatever qualifications you gain, whatever skills you gain, should be used for the betterment of society, for the service of my nation, is something that I was inculcated with from a very small somewhere in my 10th standard, 9th standard. The exact date would be 31st of December 2004. But that is when I heard my Guru Shri Avinash Dharmadhikari sir speak at a public forum. That is when I had heard sir speak for the first time, and sir was a factor who had an enormous influence on me. As I'm sure many of us will be aware, sir runs an excellent training institute in Pune also. So because of all of these exposures, a realization that society is something much bigger than us and we should contribute to it, civil services was definitely one of the options that I had. My school training, the experiences I had in college, I did some theater, I acted a bit, I was cultural secretary. Because of all of these reasons, I also had being in a leadership position was something that I enjoyed.
Okay.
Which is why I wanted to work in a capacity that would, satisfy the need to serve my nation and my society, satisfy my desire to be in a leadership position, and also be an excellent professional career. And the civil services is a perfect fit for all of these categories, which is why I believe sometime in my second year of engineering, that is when I decided to, third year of engineering actually is when I decided to prepare for these civil services. In my final year, I started studying for it.
Okay.
My attempt was when I was still in my final year. In fact, my first prelim attempt was on the 21st of May 2012, and my final year engineering exam was a week after that.
Okay.
So I actually wrote my first attempt before I finished my graduation. That attempt I did not clear, but my second attempt I wrote immediately after that, and I got selected. So it was a gradual process. Civil services was one option that I always considered. And finally, by my third year of graduation, I decided that this is it. This is what I want to do.
Okay. So a well thought out process in short.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Rishikesh, you have been in this service for 6 years. So tell us that one thing that is a wow factor for your service in particular, or something that you genuinely like, that this is one thing that I love about this service.
The thing about the Indian Revenue Service is that it is an extremely challenging service. It will always keep you on your toes, because here the task, particularly the assignment that I currently have, you have to remain one step ahead of the best minds in the nation's economy. You have to be a step ahead of the best chartered accountants, the best CAs, the best CEOs. It's a challenging atmosphere. There is something that you learn every day. The job profiler says that anytime you feel confident that yes, now I know what I'm doing. Once you start getting into that comfort zone, there is going to be some event that will bring you down to earth and prove to you that you're just a novice. So it's a very challenging service, something that keeps you on your toes, makes you learn continuously. There is something new that we have to learn. We have to read every single day, keep on updating our skill sets on a regular basis. And that I think is for me, that is the biggest wow factor. That is the one factor that I enjoy the most.
Okay. Are you able to get the work-life balance, or are the timings like really? Say, is it a 9 to 5 job, or are you on job 24/7?
It depends on the specific postings. My current posting is such that currently I am posted in the intelligence wing, because of which there are no fixed timings. More than 9 to 5, it frequently ends up being a 9 a.m. to a 5 a.m. job. There have been times when there have been times when at least once or twice a month I have to stay overnight in my office. So currently I feel I don't get enough time to spend at home. But again, that depends on the posting, which I'm sure is the case with all services, all departments.
Right.
There are certain positions where you have to be at work, 24/7, 365. And there are certain postings where you can say, "Nahin, it's a 9 to 5 job. I reach and 5 I leave for my home and I switch off my phone and that's it." Unfortunately or fortunately, I'm not in a post right now where I have that luxury. But yes, it depends on the postings. It's not a uniform thing across the country, across ranks, across the hierarchy. It's not a uniform thing.
Okay. Okay. Is this service a uniform service? I'm not sure whether it is.
Yes, it is. The fundamental, because the Indian Revenue Service is fundamentally tasked with three activities. It is customs, indirect taxes, and narcotics. So, because customs and indirect taxes has a legacy from the pre-independence era, because of which we end up being a uniform service up to the rank of the deputy commissioner, which is my current rank. This is the senior most rank at which we retain our uniform.
Okay.
To compare it with the police, this rank is equivalent to a district SP.
Okay.
So up to this rank, it remains a uniform service, after which the uniform is no longer worn in the subsequent hierarchies.
Okay. Tell me, when you were preparing, since you cleared in 2014, did you have a social media or an internet influence on you? What I mean is that there is so much floating around, there is so much on the internet about civil services. So, negative or positive, was there an impact? And is there a genuine impact on kids studying or preparing these days because of these internet and social media things?
I sound very archaic when I say this, but when I was preparing, we did not have so much of an internet influence, although it has been just 6 years ago. Honestly, there were not adequate sources, positive or negative. I mean it in both senses back then. Of course, I was quite active on the internet and on social media. Back then, today I see that the trend is growing more towards Instagram and Twitter, but back then the most important medium was Facebook. So I would spend a lot of time on Facebook also, getting into endless arguments with complete strangers. But for the purpose of learning, I did refer to a few sources, but they weren't all that many. Today I see that a lot of institutes providing guidance and support have put an enormous amount of content on the internet, a lot of which is free, which is actually quite good from the perspective of aspirants who do not have the financial sources to get proper guidance. It's good that there is a lot of free and open content available on the internet. But back then there wasn't a lot of. I remember one of my optional subject was history. One of the components in history was world history. So for world history, I had come across a set of video lectures on YouTube, and I diligently downloaded them, and I would go through them sometimes for the purpose of revision. And that was a very unique thing. Amongst all of my peers, amongst all of my friends, all of whom were preparing together, I would probably be the first one to use the internet as a regular source.
Okay.
Whereas today, I feel that today's aspirants and today the students who are preparing for the services exam would be referring to the internet on a daily basis.
Okay.
So I think the impact has grown drastically in the past 5-6 years.
And what about the impact that once you clear, still there are a number of officers, they take to the internet, they post their things online, social media also they use a lot. So what is your take on it? How much does that influence in general to the aspirants and the other officers?
Again, I would demarcate it into good influencers and bad influencers. Unfortunately, like every part of society, there is good and there is bad, which again is a very subjective definition. But what we would broadly feel is good and bad. There are a few officers that I follow quite diligently on Facebook and on Twitter who share excellent content, who share excellent perspectives, who are influencers in a lot of ways, and the sort of moderating and sobering effect that officers should have on society. I feel they are able to extend a lot of that through their social media presence. Of course, the moot point is that a lot of the officers who are quite popular and active on social media are also able to make an outreach of the government's programs, which is an essential task. A lot of programs do need visibility, do need awareness, so that the common man does know more and more. The one excellent example of this is that during the COVID era, there were two joint secretary rank officers who would have daily briefings which were hosted on PIB, which is the Press Information Bureau, which is the government's official communication channel. But very, very few people knew about PIB. So there were officers, individual officers who have a lot of followers, who have a lot of influence, who could, just click on retweet or share, so that the outreach of these platforms would increase much more. And these days, in fact, social media is also becoming a very effective grievance redressal mechanism. Just a week ago, this happened with a colleague of mine. She's posted in Bangalore. A person had some issues for which he was not able to find any satisfactory resolution. So he just tweeted about it, and that tweet was marked to the proper officer within a matter of hours. And within a span of 12 hours, that person's problem could be resolved. A lot of departments, the railways has been at the forefront of adapting social media in a lot of ways. The Ministry of External Affairs has done it quite effectively. So I see a lot of officers are using social media for a lot of good, for making the administration much more responsive. With internet, the internet rates in India in terms of per GB price are probably the cheapest in the world right now.
Yes.
I think other than a few sub-Saharan African nations, we would be the cheapest in the world, because of which internet has percolated everywhere. So I feel social media is becoming the instrument of good. Sometimes, unfortunately, what a few people do need to be reminded is that we are all also governed by the conduct rules, which I feel all officers should diligently stick to. The conduct rules have been in black and white for about 6 decades, 7 decades now. I think that is sometimes a reminder is necessary, but broadly, I feel it's an instrument of good and making positive changes all around.
Incidentally, I was thinking whether to ask you this question or not. That when you said there are a lot of positive impacts that officers have, there are a lot of negative comments that are drawn because of the actions of the officers or whatever they have posted. I don't know whether to comment on that, whether I and all of us are, whether we are right in a right place to comment on that. But there are a few people who feel that the dignity of that position, the dignity of that post is taken away when you use social media too much. Do you feel that?
I feel it's more than the volume of usage. I feel it is the nature of the usage that is the real determining factor. Yes, I mean, something like internet trolling is unfortunately a reality that exists. There's nothing that can be done about it. But as civil servants, all of us are accustomed to growing thick skins. So a lot of times, a lot of things do go. If we get nonsensical feedback, we just tend to ignore it or walk away from it. In some cases, like I said, the way that social media is becoming a tool of making administration more responsive. It is also, in a way, becoming a tool of increasing accountability. The things that you say and the things that you do are under immense scrutiny by millions of people across the country instantaneously, which is why the responsibility on all civil servants, on us, increases to make sure that we maintain the dignity of our offices. And more than the negative, I prefer to focus on the positives. There are a lot of people who are putting out excellent content, uh, getting into discussions, getting feedback. A lot of times we do tend to get a lot of excellent feedback from domain experts. And just as an example, there was some person who had shared a tweet about how the COVID testing policy can be optimized better. And that was a tweet that got a lot of traction and was influential in some way, impacting the decision making process.
Right.
So I do feel that, as long as, and I'm sure that I know that a lot of civil servants are able to distinguish what to ignore and what to take positive,
Right.
and just carry on while maintaining the dignity of their respective offices.
Right. That almost brings me to the end of this. But before you go, please tell us, do you have something very special or a message that you would like to give to the aspirants of UPSC or any services for that matter?
Uh, I would like to give a message to civil service aspirants as well as all young people in that age group. Uh, the civil services exam is not rocket science. There is nothing that will say that any person can succeed and someone should not succeed. There is no distinguishing factor in that regard. It is not rocket science. It is a very fair and democratic exam process. What is required is a lot of discipline and a lot of tenacity. There are going to be points when you feel unsure about yourself. I would feel that almost on a daily basis. I would question myself that would I clear the exam or not. But you have to get over that fear and you have to keep on working. You require a lot of discipline. In fact, one distinguishing factor that I will say any person who has been successful in this exam would have is that discipline and that tenacity. That no matter how hard, no matter how many times they had to go through the same things again and again, they still persisted. And I feel those are skills and those are values that all of us should inculcate in our daily lives, irrespective of whether someone aspires to be a civil servant or someone wants to pursue any excellence in any walk of life. Which is why I feel this is one thing I would want to share with everyone, that don't give up hope, don't lose your discipline. Discipline is extremely essential. It is very underrated. I don't think we emphasize on that factor hard enough. And my best wishes to all those aspirants out there working hard, and I'm sure you would be successful in your chosen walk of life.
Thank you so much. I know I had said that we are going to end this interview, but I have a couple of more questions that came to my mind.
Absolutely.
Do you think that the amount of time, energy, and the stress that comes from preparing for this service, at the end of it, there is a list of services that you can get chosen to. So, do you think that this amount of time, energy, and stress is worth it?
Absolutely. I do feel it is worth it. But my answer is going to be biased because by the grace of God, I was successful in the exam. So my answer is a little biased in that perspective. But yes, it definitely is worth it because irrespective of the result of the exam, the UPSC exam is something which will enrich you as a human being in a lot of ways. Like I said, it will teach you the meaning and the value of hard work, of discipline, but it will also give you a much broader perspective of the world around you. And you will definitely be enriched as a human being. That having said, I will still urge aspirants that, you should not headlessly go chasing attempt after attempt.
Mhm.
The rules have changed, and the number of attempts available are six for the general category, nine for the reserve category, and so on.
Mhm.
Most aspirants give their attempts in their 20s, which is in a lot of ways the most productive period of anyone's life. That is the period when we are going to learn, we are going to gain essential skill set. So after say 3 or 4 attempts, every aspirant should also start thinking of a plan B. I feel it's my responsibility to tell all aspirants that keep on believing, keep on working hard, but then also have a plan B ready if you don't succeed after say 3 attempts or so.
Okay.
But yes, the effort and the amount of stress and the amount of hard work that you have to put in is definitely worth it.
So finally, I hope this is my last question and nothing comes to my mind more. When I have heard a lot of people say this, that when you're preparing for UPSC, then they say that UPSC is a journey. What exactly do you mean by that? What is this journey all about?
That's a very profound question. Uh, Journey is one way that a lot of people have described it. A lot of people have described it as a marathon also. I don't want to get to speak at a very theoretical and philosophical level. It's a journey of self-realization, of knowing yourself.
Okay.
What that means is, I'll just give you an example.
Mm-hmm.
What that means is, when any person starts preparing, uh, just a very small example. One of the basic sources of preparation is a newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
Once, if any person were to open today's newspaper, they would see some Hollywood scandal, some Bollywood scandal, or some person got into a fight with someone else, some expose, some masala news, something like that. As someone who starts preparing for the civil services, you will feel that these are the topics, these are the discussions of the day, and this is what is making the biggest impact on my life. 6 months down the line, you will reach a point where you will realize that uh, it's not the headlines, it's not the page three that is the most important part of the world around me.
Mm-hmm.
It is that small 100-word article written in the editorial page where some government policy has been analyzed. That is the thing. It sounds very drab. It sounds there is no masala to it, but that is something that is going to have the biggest impact on my life. And 12 months after preparation, you'll be able to start picking holes into what that editorial is saying. So I feel it's a journey of self-realization. It's also at a personal level. Once you start, when I started preparing, I would think that you know sitting and studying for 8 hours and 10 hours, that's not something that I can do.
Mm-hmm.
Competing with 7 or 8 lakh people and being one out of 1,000, that's not something. I don't belong to a IIT. I don't belong to an IIM. My college was also mediocre at best. I never got any scholarships. I never came first in any race. So you keep on doubting yourself that, yeah, out of 8 or 10 lakhs, how am I going to fit into that 1,000 bracket? But when you cross that threshold, that is when you realize that you have it in you to succeed, and you start realizing that how to go about these things. It's not some magic that someone else. It's not by magic that someone else is able to achieve it. You also have the capacity and the caliber to achieve it. So that is why it's called a journey of self-realization throughout.
So should we call it a journey of becoming a normal person to an achiever? Can we call it that? in every
No,
I don't mean it in the sense that only when you clear UPSC you will become an achiever. I'm not saying it in that sense. But what I understood
yeah,
from your is you were a normal person going about your everyday life, and suddenly you have a different perspective about looking at things from very different
absolutely.
and so you
Absolutely.
have
To that, I would
but
agree.
in a very different sense.
Absolutely. I would agree with you completely on that. In fact, just one small anecdote that I would like to share on this,
Hmm.
which I feel would be useful for a lot of young people without wanting to lecture them or giving them any pravachan on that. But for me, that turning point came in college.
Okay.
When I started engineering, me and my friends, we would in Pune, there are two theater competitions,
Hmm.
Purushottam Karandak and Firodia Karandak, which are held every 6 months alternatively, which is, the most prestigious inter-college theater event in Maharashtra.
Okay.
So I became a part, in my first year, I became a part of the art circle. We started competing in these exams. And I was very lucky to have a set of friends around me who were extremely accomplished in whatever they did. I
Okay.
had one friend who had been learning classical music for 16 years. At the age of 18, not 16 perhaps, but 12 years. He started learning at 6 or 7 years old. So someone who had been learning for 14 or 16 years, someone who had been playing the guitar for 10 years. So I thought, what activity have I dedicated myself to?
Mm.
Uh, Something as menial as watching a movie. Can I say that I have watched one good movie by once a week? Can I name five good directors whose movies I have watched?
Yeah.
Going out to travel, going trekking or playing. Is there anything that I can say that at least for 6 months I have tried to be good at something? And that is when I realized that there is a lot of, which is the case with all of us, that there is a lot of potent energy within all of us that is looking for a productive outlet. So
Absolutely.
for me, after my college ended, UPSC was one area where I could channel all of that energy. And I decided that I'm going to try to be the best at this.
Hmm.
Whether I succeed or not is beyond my capacity. That's for the board to decide, for the commission to decide.
Right.
But those efforts are within me. So I decided to be that's the area where I want to focus all my energy and try to be the best at. So
Mhm.
more than becoming an achiever, what you said, it was the journey to having a broader perspective
Okay.
on life, and that I feel is the biggest thing I've gotten from the civil services exam.
Okay. Okay. I think that brings us to the end of this conversation. Thank you so much, Rishikesh, for
Thank
joining.
you so much.
We
Thank you
enjoyed
so
it.
much. It has been my pleasure. Thank you.